Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today is day 43 of the ongoing war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine, and we'll just go ahead and jump right into this. And first, we'll start north and northeast of Kiev. I've been getting quite a few questions in regards to the Russian operation that took place, again, both northwest and northeast of Kiev. And some of those questions relate to, well, the Russians still north of Kiev, and the answer to that would be no. The Russians have withdrawn. There may be some pockets of Russian forces that may have been left behind in some areas, possibly by mistake, possibly because they were just they had lost contact with their higher echelons. And again, obviously, Russian forces continue to be deployed very either close or just across the shared border between Belarus and Ukraine. And again, there are continuing Russian forces again closer to the border. The shared border between Ukraine and Russia. But in terms of seeing large Russian forces, for instance, that were in the area of Hostomel, all the way over towards Kiev and Chernobyl, all those forces have withdrawn. Now the question then that is quite often asked is, were those Russian forces defeated? Did the Russians retreat after a series of military disasters that occurred northwest and northeast of Kiev? And the answer to that question is no. The Russians were not militarily defeated, but the Russians were in a position where they risked continued counterattack by a growing Ukrainian host that continues to conduct mass mobilizations of forces, and then also not having the ability to continue offensive operations without leaving other areas of the total Ukraine theater of operation in a precarious position. So while the Russians maintained control over some rather vast areas, and again, when we talk about the theater of operations that were northwest and northeast of Kiev, I don't think many folks really truly understand how large of an area this is. So again, running from roughly the Belarusian border all the way down to the outskirts of Kiev is roughly 60 miles. And in between that 60 miles, and again, 60 miles is for in a hostile military environment is quite a distance. And within that 60 miles, not just north-south, but the Russian front extended probably another 30 miles, both east and west, and 60 miles north and south. So a massive area that the Russians were having to occupy with significant forces that were very, very close to kind of the center of Ukrainian power in terms of force capacity and continued deployments of Ukrainian forces. So a very, very challenging military endeavor that the Russian military attempted early in this war. And not only that, you have the issue of the terrain itself. You have very built up urban areas. At the same time, you have massive forests, evergreen forests, spruce forests. You have swamps, you have rivers, you have lakes and ponds, and it just really makes for a very, very difficult and challenging military environment to operate under, especially given the tenacious resistance being offered by the Ukrainian military. So again, in all likelihood, the Russians could have maintained those captured areas, but while they maintained those captured areas and had to continue to deploy forces to defend those captured areas, those forces that they were utilizing to defend the areas northwest and northeast of Kiev could have been used to progress further operations in areas such as we're seeing now in the eastern separatist areas. Again, right now the hot zone is kind of Izium down towards Sloviansk. Right now the Russians really appear to be focused on continued progress near Izium, south of Izium, towards Sloviansk, and at the same time another multi-pronged operation coming out of Horlovika and this area here, which is Severodonetsk. So in order to facilitate continued operations in the east against a very strong Ukrainian force that is continuing to fight, the Russians really had no choice but to withdraw some of these forces, or most all of these forces, from this northern area of operations, and eventually reconstitute some of those forces, and then redeploy some of those forces to other areas where they may be more successful. And specifically, if you look at the terrain that is in the southeast of Ukraine, again, these areas really kind of are the best suited for large-scale Russian mechanized military operations. So again, you have very large fields. Obviously, you have some where you would basically hedgerows that separate some of these fields, but the distances that one can see, because it's very, very flat, very much a plain type of environment that the Russians are very, very well suited for. And that is probably why we've seen some success in the southeast versus some of the problems that have happened in the northwest. Let's take just simple baseline tactics. Let's take the in-law, the anti-tank weapon system that was provided by the Ukrainians, by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, specifically the United Kingdom. Thousands of these in-law light anti-tank weapon systems were provided to the Ukrainian military. And if you look at some of these areas in the northwest of Kiev and north of Kiev, given the fact that the in-law is a direct line-of-sight weapon system, which is more or less effective out towards 100 plus meters, out towards about 600 meters, then obviously you can clearly see that Ukrainian units hiding in bushes and foliage and forests, firing at Russian tanks, maneuvering down some of these roads that are also a very heavy urbanized environment intermixed with forests, make the in-law a much more proficient weapon system. Now, at the same time, that may cause issue with the Javelin, which is more of a long-distance weapon system. But then we go over and we head back to the northeast, or I'm sorry, the southeast area of operations, and you're looking again at very vast plains and areas that could make it very, very difficult to deploy the in-law in certain areas. Again, your line of sight distance is much greater in some of these areas to the southeast than what it is to the northwest of Kiev. So that's just one tactical consideration, I think, that you really have to look at. The terrain is much different north of Kiev than what we're seeing in the southeast. Now, at the same time, there is very large urban built-up areas that the Russians are going to have to fight in. And as we're right now seeing the heavy fighting taking place in Mariupol and other areas, such as soon to be the street fighting that is going to take place in Severodonetsk, this is going to be very much the same as what we're seeing inside of Mariupol. Now, I want to go down and have a look at Mariupol, and I want to show you guys just why it is so challenging for the Russian military operation within the confines of Mariupol. So first, as I've talked about before, the Ukrainian forces have had many years to prepare Mariupol for the possibility of a siege type of war that would take place. The Ukrainians had anticipated that, in fact, if the Russians were to move on Ukraine, or even if we were to see localized fighting, meaning the DPR or LPR launching operations against Ukrainian forces, in all likelihood, at some point, Mariupol would become a frontline city sooner rather than later, if you compare and contrast some other Ukrainian cities. But specifically, I want to look at this area. This is the industrial area that sits on the eastern bank of the Kalamias River. And we know that the Azov regiments, territorial defense units, and regular Ukrainian military have fortified this area near these giant steelworks, some of the largest steelworks in Western Europe. And again, this is a massive facility. I don't really think you can really truly appreciate the size of the facility unless you kind of get down on the ground and see what you're looking at. But for instance, these are rail cars. These are big rail cars. And as you can see, as we pan up, the rail cars get much, much smaller. And you can see the size of just this building here. And this building, my understanding, this building right here has almost 2 miles in square footage, if that translates. So it's damn near a half a mile in length. And again, not only that, but the construction of the building, these steelworks were designed to operate during World War III. So these facilities were created during the Soviet Union. And again, the intent of them being built was to quite possibly survive and continue to produce steel for the Soviet Union during World War III. And with that being said, they constructed underground bomb shelters. My understanding is there is a vast complex under this facility of tunnels and bomb shelters and ways to maneuver around this facility underneath the ground, underneath the earth. And in fact, we're now hearing that Russian forces may be preparing 2-ton, 3-ton ordnance to then drop on some of these fortified positions of the Ukrainian and the Azov regiments that are deployed within the confines of these very built-up, urbanized industrial centers. And obviously this area right now is still under the control of the Azov battalion. I believe at this point it is possible that the Russians have claimed more territory than what is shown on the map. My understanding right now, the two major areas of fighting are the industrial area, and that's this area here. Hopefully you can see where my cursor is kind of hovering around. And again, this area is huge. It is massive. It's on scale beyond of some of the industrial areas that we have seen in other prior conflicts, such as the battles of Stalingrad, Leningrad, and so forth and so on. This area was built post-World War II, and again are what I would define as megastructures. And we're seeing the fighting continuing in and around these mega structures and these mega built-up areas that is proving to become very, very difficult for the Russians to enter and take control over. And again, I don't think you can really appreciate the size of these buildings unless you kind of get down and you look and you understand that these are rail cars that you're looking at to the left of this facility. This is some sort of civilian causeway or overpass that goes over what would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 train tracks. More than that, I think it's probably more like 7, or if not more. And again, more rail cars over here. But just the sheer size of it, as you pan out, you can really start to appreciate and understand just how challenging of a military objective this is for Russian forces. And again, compounding that and making it much more challenging is the fact that it looks like the Russians are using a variety of forces that may have never worked together before. Again, Chechen units, National Guard units, regular Russian military units. We understand that even Russian federal police forces, the OMON units, are operating. Those black beret forces of the former Interior Ministry that are now part of the Russian National Guard are now operating against Ukrainian forces within the confines of Mariupol. So a host of different forces the Russians are using, and again, I have to question what that communication back and forth between these varieties of units, especially in this type of urban fight, it has to be challenging for the Russian military. And then the other area is the Pramansky area, and this is more of port facilities and residential, both buildings and individual residential homes. But again, many of these Soviet-era apartment blocks all have bomb shelters underneath of them. They were all designed, given that Mariupol was a critical infrastructure city in terms of the production of steel and manufacturing, and given that it's set on the Black Sea, and as we know, just to the south, or I'm sorry, the Sea of Azov, just to the south, obviously you have the NATO member Turkey. So Mariupol was designed to resist airstrikes, and the building of the buildings that are inside of Mariupol again kind of have that purpose-based design where the Russians, the Soviets at the time, had anticipated that this could be a frontline city subjected to possible NATO aircraft attack. And that's why you see some of these buildings that have been built very robustly. And again, the concept of the bomb shelters underneath a lot of these buildings that is proving to be very, very challenging for the Russian military as it advances into deeper and deeper into Mariupol. And then compounding that, we don't know what else the Ukrainians may have done in terms of built up additional defenses in and around Mariupol. There's another weapon system that I want to talk about and give a quick shout out to in terms of its effectiveness. And we hear a lot about the Javelin. We hear a lot about the In-Law. We also hear that the Stinger may not be performing quite as well as initially advertised. I've heard some reports that it takes quite a few Stingers to bring down one Russian helicopter, meaning they quite frequently are missing and are not performing probably as well, meaning the Stinger against aircraft as some of these anti-tank guided weapon systems that NATO has provided to the Ukrainians. But more importantly, this is an indigenous system that the Ukrainians are deploying. It's called the Stugna, and it is a anti-tank guided weapon system. Now, what makes this system very unique is it is a remotely operated system. So what does that mean? So as we see, this is one of the areas of the Russian advance. We could say that, let's say that Ukrainian forces decide to put the Stugna on top of this building here. Well, there's a cable line that then runs from the Stugna, and it can run to an extent of approximately 50 meters from the actual weapon system itself, and so you can then move the actual control station 50 meters from the actual weapon system itself. So you can have the actual anti-tank guided weapon system operating here, overlooking this field, and again, not again. I haven't mentioned that the Stugna has can engage targets out to about 5 kilometers. So you can place the Stugna here and then run its control station inside of a building over here someplace. And we've seen quite a bit of video evidence of the Stugna being very successful in this ongoing conflict. We've seen the Stugna, I believe it's spelled Stunga, but it's pronounced Stugna, and it was designed by both a joint effort by the state of Ukraine and Belarus, and now it's being widely deployed by the Ukrainians in this ongoing fight. And while it doesn't have a thermal imaging sight, it has a normal black and white low light camera, but it also has the ability to track or box targets, and which makes it much more easier for the operator operating the control station from 50 meters from the actual weapon system to engage and target moving targets or stationary targets. In fact, we have seen verified evidence that the Stugna has actually shot down Russian attack helicopters that were kind of in a stationary hover, and the Stugna was able to bring down one of those helicopters. But we've seen repeated examples of that Stugna system being very successful in the ongoing war, in which it has probably engaged and destroyed dozens of Russian targets throughout this campaign. So a very fairly unique weapon system in which the operator does not have to actually fire the weapon system from the actual location that the missile is actually starting from. Unlike the Javelin or the NLAW, again, this is a remotely operated system, again, which makes it a very, very unique system in terms of keeping the operator safe, and then allowing the missile system to then engage targets while the operator is operating quite possibly from a basement, from a house 50 meters away from the location of the actual Stugna missile system. But I thought I'd mention that. Again, it's something that is we're continuing to see in the course of this conflict. But again, right now, all the fighting, the major portions of the fighting that we're seeing right now continue to be south of Izium, west and near within the environments of Severodonetsk, and north and northeast and northwest of Horlovika as well. And again, we believe that Russia continues to maneuver forces both from the northern Kiev area of operation towards both the area of operations towards Kharkiv and areas south of there, as right now, again, as we talked about in earlier episodes, the Russians intend to continue the offensive in the southwest, and again are looking to at some point, hopefully for the Russians at least, to achieve a breakthrough, seize control of Kramatorsk, seize control of Sloviansk, and then quite possibly continue operations on towards the Dnieper River. I do think at this point, again, as I talked about in previous episodes, this is going to be a fairly long operation in which right now Russian intent appears to be to seize control of all territory east of the Dnieper River. Now they're going to do this in segments, and they're not going to try and take it all at one time. But right now, at least for the Russian focus is kind of the southeast Donbass area. And again, we'll have to see with the redeployment of those forces from Kiev and other areas if in fact we see if the Russians can be successful in this area. And again, if the Russians are not, if we don't see a Russian breakthrough and the Russians start to secure some of these areas, we could quite possibly be seeing a Russian defeat in the making. Now, again, it's much too early to say whether that is going to happen or not. Again, the Russian military is still very much active, still very much on the attack, and still continue with its tactical air and cruise missile efforts, depleting and degrading Ukrainian, again, both ammunition storage, petroleum storage, fuel storage, anything that the Ukrainians need to conduct war, the Russians are going after it. But at the same time, these NATO countries are still freely transporting equipment, much needed equipment, ammunition, munitions across the border from Poland, across the border from Romania, across the border from Slovakia into Ukraine proper, and are continuing to help the Ukrainians in its ongoing war effort. And that is the status for today. Obviously, again, we're going to continue to watch what's happening in this area of operations, where you can clearly see where we're looking at. And we will have more information very, very soon. Appreciate everybody joining us, and I look forward to doing another video here very soon. Have a good day.